My name is Emily Turner, and I'm 28 years old. The day my older brother Brandon and I both got accepted into our dream universities should have been the most unforgettable moment of our lives. In a way, it was, but not for the reason you'd hope. Brandon got into Wharton for his MBA. I got into Caltech for biomedical AI. My acceptance came after months of working double shifts and countless sleepless nights fine-tuning research papers. But when I walked into our family's living room that day, the celebration had already begun, and it wasn't for me. There were champagne flutes clinking, laughter echoing through the house, and a congratulatory banner that read, "Here's to our future CEO." The CEO they were referring to? My brother, of course. My father, Mark Turner, a senior software architect, had tears in his eyes. My mother, Susan, who managed accounting for a mid-sized firm, kept repeating how Brandon is going to make this family proud. I stood in the doorway holding my acceptance letter, the Caltech seal clearly visible on the envelope. When I finally found a gap in the celebration noise and said, "I got in too," my mother turned and smiled like I had just mentioned I'd done well on a quiz. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said. "Come grab a glass." But the moment passed in a blink, and the conversation veered straight back to Brandon's future. His MBA housing options, his business school networking events, his summer internships. I took a sip of champagne. Standing at the edge of a party I clearly wasn't invited to celebrate. It wasn't the first time this had happened. Growing up in Seattle, Brandon had always been the bright sun in our family's sky. Charismatic, athletic, always surrounded by admirers. I was the quiet one, the science geek, the girl who built robots in the garage and stayed up reading about neural networks while everyone else watched TV. When we were younger, Brandon's birthdays came with rented halls, catered food, and 40 guests. Mine were usually takeout pizza and a homemade cake with my name spelled wrong in frosting. "You've always been more independent," my father once said when I asked why Brandon got a new car at 18 and I got a bus pass. Independence. That was the word they used like a shield. It made them feel better about giving everything to one child and telling the other to figure it out. And I did. I worked 2 jobs during college. I lived in the smallest dorm on campus and skipped spring breaks to finish lab work. My dream was clear: to build diagnostic AI that could detect life-threatening diseases before symptoms ever showed. Brandon's dream? Start a business, make a lot of money, and retire by 40. Different dreams, same family. But only one of us was considered worth investing in. So when our parents called a family meeting 2 weeks after the champagne party to discuss tuition support, I already knew what was coming. "We're going to fully support Brandon through Wharton," my dad said with a proud smile. "It's a big opportunity for him and for our family's future." My mother chimed in, "And Emily, with your strong grades, we're sure you'll qualify for scholarships. Plus, you've always been resourceful. You'll be fine." I nodded in silence. Because what do you say when the people who are supposed to back you up have already decided you don't need them? What they didn't realize was this: that moment didn't break me. It ignited me. And on the day of graduation, when I stood in front of an audience that included CEOs, deans, and yes, my parents, they would finally see who they had underestimated. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one, the overlooked sibling, or the quiet striver in a family full of noise, this story is for you. Hit like, subscribe, and share your experience in the comments. You're not alone. Your moment is coming too. I didn't always know I was the afterthought. When you're a kid, you don't have a name for unfairness. You just feel it, deep in your chest, like a weight you don't yet know how to describe. Growing up, our family looked picture perfect on the outside. We lived in a craftsman-style house tucked in a quiet Seattle suburb. My dad worked long hours as a senior developer at a big tech firm. My mom kept the books for a regional logistics company. Brandon was their golden boy, 2 years older than me, effortlessly charming, varsity everything. The kind of kid who made neighbors stop and say, "He's going places." And then there was me. I liked puzzles. I read encyclopedias for fun. At 8, I wrote my first computer program on a hand-me-down laptop that overheated if I ran Chrome and Word at the same time. When I showed it to my dad, a simple calculator app he could have coded in 2 minutes, he barely looked up from his screen. Cool, he muttered, already immersed in his work again. That was the difference. Brandon brought home a B in chemistry, and it meant tutoring, encouragement. Don't worry, son, you've got this. I brought home perfect scores in math and science, and I'd get a nod, maybe a sticker on the fridge, if my mom remembered. On my 10th birthday, I asked for a telescope. I got a board game about spelling. It's more age appropriate, my mom had said, placing it on the table next to a slice of store-bought cake. 2 weeks later, Brandon turned 12 and got a drone with a camera and flying lessons. I stopped asking for things after that, but one person always saw me. My grandmother Evelyn, my mother's mom, was a retired aerospace engineer who had worked at Boeing back when women in labs were treated like shadows. She was sharp, no nonsense, and allergic to excuses. When my parents were busy with Brandon's soccer tournaments or planning his student council campaign, Grandma Evelyn would pick me up for Saturday science days. She took me to the Pacific Science Center, to planetarium shows, to dusty little bookstores with entire shelves of women in STEM biographies. I remember one afternoon clearly. We were sitting on a park bench eating ice cream, and I just told her that my teacher said I should make more effort to be outgoing like Brandon. She didn't laugh. She didn't say just be yourself either. She looked me square in the eye and said, "You don't need to be louder to be powerful, Em. You just need to be brilliant, and I already know you are." Those words dug their way into me like roots. They held me upright on days when everything else in my house told me I wasn't enough. When I was 12, she gave me a small leather-bound notebook. The cover was soft navy blue, and inside the first page she wrote, "For Emily, to record your ideas, your fire, and the future you'll build, because one day they'll all wish they had listened." That notebook became my world. I filled it with everything: code sketches, impossible questions, machine learning ideas I didn't fully understand yet. It wasn't just a place to write. It was a promise that even if no one else believed in me, I would not let myself disappear. But life has a way of pulling away your safety nets. Grandma Evelyn passed away when I was 16. Lung cancer, diagnosed too late. The irony wasn't lost on me. The only person who ever really saw me was taken by the very thing I one day wanted to detect earlier. At her funeral, I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just held the notebook to my chest and kept hearing her voice in my mind. "You don't need to be louder. You need to be brilliant." From that moment, my path became laser-focused. I was going to study biomedical AI. I was going to save lives. And if my parents weren't going to help me get there, I would build the road myself. I worked weekends at a robotics summer camp. I taught myself Python and TensorFlow. I skipped prom to attend a tech conference in Portland that I funded with 6 months of saved-up birthday money and babysitting cash. When senior year hit, and Brandon started talking about applying to Wharton, my parents couldn't stop beaming. "He'll be the first in the family to get an MBA," my mom said proudly. I was applying to Caltech, MIT, and Stanford at the time, but no one asked about my essays. I guess they assumed I'd change my mind. Go somewhere practical. Pick something less stressful. Instead, I got into Caltech with partial scholarship and a fire that was no longer willing to stay quiet. The family meeting happened on a Tuesday night. My father had grilled salmon, my mother made her usual salad, and Brandon sat at the head of the table like a conquering hero. I remember noticing the detail, the way they'd set the dining table with the good plates, the soft cloth napkins that only came out during holidays. It felt ceremonial. I should have known what was coming. "We're so proud of both of you," my dad began, folding his hands like a CEO preparing to deliver an annual report. "Two of our children, both accepted into incredible programs. It's a blessing, really." I gave a small smile, waiting, hoping for the next sentence to be, "And we're going to support you both equally." But of course that wasn't how the story went. "We've decided," he continued, "to fully fund Brandon's MBA. Tuition, housing, living expenses, the works." I blinked. Once. "And for me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. My mom's tone softened. Sweetheart, we know how smart and capable you are. You've always found your own way. With your grades, you'll get scholarships, and we can help guide you through some student loan options. They looked at me like this was generosity, like they hadn't just told me, again, that I mattered less. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stared down at my water glass, watching the condensation run down its side like tiny rivers. Then I looked at Brandon. He looked uncomfortable, but not surprised. He knew. He always knew. I cleared my throat. So you're saying Brandon's education is an investment, but mine is a risk? My father frowned. Don't twist our words, Emily. It's about return. Business degrees have clear paths. Your field is ambitious but uncertain. And honestly, you've always been more independent. There it was again. That word. Independent. Their favorite justification for doing nothing. I stood up. My hands were trembling, but my voice wasn't. Thanks for the clarity. I'll figure it out, like I always do. And I did. I moved to Pasadena that fall with 2 suitcases, $3,000 from Grandma Evelyn's savings account, a partial scholarship, and a long spreadsheet of part-time jobs I could apply for within walking distance of Caltech's campus. My parents didn't come with me. They were helping Brandon move into a luxury apartment near Wharton. He posted a photo on Instagram that day, him in a sleek suit holding a wine glass on his rooftop balcony. The caption read, "Let the CEO era begin." I didn't have time to feel bitter. I had too much to juggle. My schedule was brutal. Classes in AI algorithms and medical diagnostics from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., a 15-hour-per-week job at the campus computer lab, weekends working as a barista at a busy cafe just off Colorado Boulevard, late nights studying, early mornings coding. Meals were ramen, granola bars, and whatever I could get free from tech club meetings. My roommate Ava came from a wealthy family in Palo Alto. Her biggest worry was which surf club to join. Mine was whether my laptop would survive one more software update. One night she asked, "Why don't your parents help more?" I gave her the same line I'd rehearsed so many times. They believe in self-sufficiency. It was cleaner than saying, they think my work isn't worth it. They think I'll be fine. And maybe they don't even care enough to find out if I'm not. Despite it all, I excelled. The coursework was hard, Caltech hard, but I lived for the challenge. I became obsessed with building models that could predict early-stage cancer signals based on subtle patterns in blood biomarkers and vocal samples. While Brandon learned how to pitch startup ideas, I learned how to decode illness before it showed its face. Still, I was exhausted, constantly. My hands shook from too much caffeine, my eyes burned from too little sleep, and my grocery list was often decided by what was on sale and what I could carry by foot. But I kept going, because this degree wasn't just paper. It was proof that I didn't need their funding, their approval, their pride. Only later would I realize that you can survive without support, but not without scars. By the second semester of my sophomore year, I was running on fumes and coffee. Caltech wasn't just hard, it was relentless. Every week brought a new algorithm, a new set of problems, and another night I'd spend cross-legged on the cold tile of our dorm's common room, hunched over my laptop while Ava slept soundly a few feet away. My code had become my sanctuary. And in that endless cycle of challenge and grind, I forgot I was surviving on the edge of burnout. That's when she found me, Maya Voss, associate professor of biomedical AI, and one of the most respected researchers in her field, was known for being brilliant, intense, and nearly impossible to impress. I hadn't taken her class, yet, but she had seen my name on the leaderboard of a school-wide deep learning competition I had accidentally dominated. I'd built a prototype model that could identify subtle vocal biomarkers of early Parkinson's with 89% accuracy using open-source datasets. One Thursday afternoon, as I was finishing a TA shift in the machine learning lab, a woman in a gray blazer with sharp eyes and coffee-stained folders walked up to me. "You're Emily Turner?" she asked. I froze mid-sentence, nearly dropping a box of cables. "Yes, ma'am." "I've read your Parkinson's code. It's messy. Your variable naming is borderline criminal, but the logic is remarkable. Have you ever considered working in my research lab? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I nodded. Good, she said. We're starting a new project focused on using AI to detect cancer through voice and blood microdata. Meet me Tuesday, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. That night, I walked back to the dorm with shaking hands and a spark I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since my grandmother died, I felt seen again. Dr. Voss's lab was everything I had dreamed of, and more terrifying than I could have imagined. The students were cutthroat brilliant, the standards astronomical. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She didn't coddle, she didn't give out praise like candy. But when she saw good work, she acknowledged it. This feature mapping is solid, she once told me, scanning a model I'd stayed up 3 nights straight to refine. Keep going. That was her version of a standing ovation. I rearranged my entire life around that lab. I cut down my hours at the cafe. I started sleeping in the lab lounge when deadlines hit. My scholarship barely covered my tuition, and my inheritance from Grandma Evelyn was dwindling faster than I'd planned. But I didn't care. I was building something that mattered. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who would benefit if we got this right. A single mother with no time for screenings. A rural farmer hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital. A stubborn grandfather who hated checkups but might one day be diagnosed earlier, just because a machine heard something no doctor could. I poured myself into the work, and Dr. Voss pushed me harder than anyone ever had. Then, in the middle of all of it, another blow I never saw coming. It was a cold Monday morning when I got the call. Mrs. Thompson, my mom's neighbor, had found my mother collapsed in the driveway after taking out the trash. A stroke. Sudden. Severe. By the time I got to Seattle, she was in a coma. The hospital lights felt foreign. The waiting room smelled too much like sterile sorrow. My father sat motionless in the corner, staring at the wall. Brandon stood by her bed, eyes red. For once, there was no bravado in him, just a scared son. And me? I was numb. I hadn't spoken to my mother properly in months. Our last real conversation had been awkward and clipped, mostly about Brandon's upcoming summer internship in Singapore. She'd asked about my lab work like she was checking a box. Now she lay silent, unable to speak at all. I held her hand for a moment, unsure what to say. Then I leaned in and whispered, I got into Dr. Voss's lab. You probably don't know who that is, but you will. Returning to Caltech after my mother's stroke was like stepping out of one world and crash landing into another. In Seattle, I'd spent 5 days in a hospital chair, listening to the flat rhythm of machines and watching a woman who once organized my lunch boxes now lie silent, caught in a limbo none of us could define. When I left, she was stable, but unresponsive. My father didn't say much. Brandon asked if I wanted to defer the semester. I didn't. I couldn't. Because the only thing I knew how to do in the face of pain was build something out of it. I arrived back in Pasadena with 2 days' worth of wrinkled clothes and a heart that felt like it had aged 5 years. The lab smelled of whiteboard markers and strong coffee. Dr. Voss didn't hug me, didn't ask if I was okay. She simply nodded and said, "We're behind, start from the top." And I did. We were knee-deep in training our second prototype, an AI model that could analyze micropatterns in speech and trace anomalies to early indicators of throat and pancreatic cancer. The concept was revolutionary, but fragile. We were still failing 7 out of 10 test runs, and even the successful ones weren't statistically reliable enough for publication. But failure didn't scare me. Not anymore. Every night I stayed until the lights in the engineering building shut off automatically. I combed through thousands of lines of code, restructured convolutional layers, optimized parameters until sunrise. My fingers were cramping from typing. My eyes burned from fatigue. My body begged for rest, but I refused, because this wasn't just about me. This was about Evelyn. This was about my mother. This was about making sure no one else had to sit beside a hospital bed thinking, if we'd known sooner. By mid-March, we had a breakthrough. It came unexpectedly, like they always do. I'd rewritten the vocal pre-processing pipeline based on a paper I found from a Czech research group buried in a paywalled journal. It adjusted for microtremors in low-frequency ranges, something no English language dataset had addressed properly. That change shifted everything. Our false positives dropped by 40%. The model began detecting early indicators, with 93% accuracy in simulation. I ran the numbers 3 times before telling anyone. Dr. Voss reviewed the outputs in silence. Then she exhaled, a slow, measured breath, and said the words I had been chasing since the moment I stepped on campus. "We're ready." The following weeks felt like a blur of whiteboards, meetings, and technical drafts. Dr. Voss nominated me to be first author on the paper. I nearly cried. She said I'd earned it. Every line of code, every missed meal, every night on the lab floor with nothing but a hoodie and hope for a pillow. And then came the impossible offer. Stanford Medical Innovation Journal, one of the most competitive undergraduate research publications in the country, requested a pre-review. "They usually don't even look at student submissions," Dr. Voss told me, sliding the email across her screen. "But yours, they're interested." It didn't feel real. I walked out of the lab that evening, stared up at the stars above the Caltech quad, and felt something I hadn't felt since the day I opened my Caltech acceptance letter. Pride. Not the kind handed to you over dinner speeches and champagne flutes. The kind you build line by line, layer by layer, through sheer force of will. Brandon called that night. It was unexpected. "Hey," he said. "Dad told me about Mom's condition. How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "Functional. That sounds very you." I smiled, despite everything. Then he added, "Listen, I know things have been weird between all of us, but I heard about your research. Dad mentioned something about cancer detection. That's incredible, Em. I mean it." I was silent. "Do you ever think," he continued, "that maybe Mom and Dad just didn't know how to support someone like you?" I looked out the window, the city lights flickering below like quiet pixels of life. "I don't know," I said honestly, but I stopped waiting for them to figure it out. The invitation came in a cream envelope, slipped under my dorm door like it was just another letter. It wasn't. It was the official notice from the Caltech Annual Research Symposium Committee. "You have been selected as a keynote presenter." I stared at the thick paper for a solid 5 minutes. There were only 5 keynote slots, and they usually went to PhD candidates or faculty. For an undergrad to be chosen, especially a female undergrad in biomedical AI, was practically unheard of. Dr. Voss barely reacted when I told her. She just gave a rare half smile and said, "Don't waste it." The weeks leading up to the symposium passed in a controlled storm. There were pitch rehearsals, abstract submissions, panel briefings, and a video team that followed me around the lab for the university's media department. They wanted to highlight student innovation. I wanted to disappear. My old notebook, the one Grandma Evelyn gave me, was filled with crossed-out drafts of my speech. I didn't want to just talk about algorithms and data pipelines. I wanted to talk about what it means to be overlooked, what it means to work through silence, through hunger, through the sound of your family cheering for someone else while you're saving your last $20 for printer credit. But how do you say that in front of donors and deans? A week before the event, I got a message from my father. "Heard you're giving a talk at Caltech. Brandon says it's a big deal. We'd love to come." I stared at the text, rereading it until the words blurred. No apology, no recognition. Just, now that everyone else was paying attention, they wanted in. Still, I said yes, because this moment wasn't just for me. It was for the girl who coded under a blanket to keep the light from waking her roommate. For the girl who whispered scientific dreams to a grandmother who believed when no one else did. They were going to hear me, whether they wanted to or not. The night of the symposium, the auditorium lights dimmed at exactly 6 p.m. I sat backstage, heart pounding in rhythm with the soft jazz playing through the speakers. My hands were cold, my mouth was dry, but I wasn't afraid. I was ready. When my name was announced, the spotlight hit, and I stepped onto the stage with measured steps and a notebook tucked tightly in my palm. I scanned the audience. There they were, seated halfway back. My father in a suit he probably wore to board meetings. My mother next to him, her expression unreadable. Brandon beside them, arms folded, eyes locked on me. I took a deep breath. Good evening. My name is Emily Turner, and I want to tell you about something invisible that could save your life. The room hushed. I began walking them through the science, the biomarkers, the vocal patterns, the AI model that now predicted 5 types of early-stage cancer with industry-defining accuracy. But I didn't stop at the science. I told them about the long nights, the ramen dinners, the sacrifices. I told them what it means to build a life out of nothing but grit and a grandmother's belief. And I ended with this. Innovation doesn't always come from the loudest voices or the best-funded teams. Sometimes it comes from the ones you didn't think to invest in. Sometimes the invisible girl in the corner grows up to save lives. And when she finally gets a microphone, she doesn't waste it. There was silence, then thunderous applause. After the event, people flooded toward the stage. Researchers, donors, students asking for mentorship. Professor Voss appeared at my side, handed me a bottle of water, and murmured, "Told you not to waste it." Behind the crowd, I saw my parents slowly making their way toward me. My mother was crying. My father looked pale. Brandon smiled, proud but quiet. They stood before me, unsure, almost reverent, like I was someone they didn't fully recognize. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. They waited until the crowd thinned. While donors shook my hand and research students asked for mentorship advice, my parents hovered at the edge of the room, like people unsure if they were allowed to step into a space they'd never bothered to visit before. I saw them whispering to each other. My mother looked like she'd just run a marathon. My father, who usually moved through the world like he owned it, stood with his hands awkwardly clasped. And then they approached. "Emily," my mother said first, her voice trembling. "That was breathtaking." I nodded, silent. My father stepped forward next, reaching out as if we were at a boardroom meet and greet. "Incredible work. The audience was floored. Your presentation, your poise. I mean, Stanford's going to publish this?" I didn't take his hand. "Why are you here?" I asked softly. He blinked. "What do you mean? We wanted to support you." "No," I said, still calm. "You wanted to be seen supporting me. That's different." The air tightened. "I spent 4 years building something in silence. You never asked how I was doing. You didn't come to move-in day. You didn't even know the name of my advisor until Brandon told you." My mother's eyes filled instantly. "We didn't know how to. We thought you were okay, Emily. You were always so capable." "There it is again," I said bitterly. "That word, capable. You used it as permission to neglect me. You gave Brandon everything, your money, your attention, your hope. I was just the quiet one who'd figure it out." My father exhaled through his nose. "That's not fair." I stared at him. "You told me funding his MBA was a better investment because business had a clear return. You called my future, biomedical AI, ambitious but uncertain. And now that medtech firms are offering partnership talks and I've got 3 fellowship invitations, you're ready to be proud?" They both froze, and then Brandon, who'd been silent, finally stepped forward. "She's right," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I've been trying to tell you that for years. You pushed everything into me and assumed she'd just survive. And she did. But it wasn't fair." I turned to him, surprised. "I didn't speak up enough," he added. "I should have. I saw how hard you worked. I let it happen because it benefited me." His words hit harder than anything my parents had said, because they were real, honest. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. My mother finally reached for my hand, but she didn't take it. She just held it there, palm up, open. "We were wrong," she said, tears now running freely. "And we are so, so sorry. We want to know you, not just the scientist, the woman you've become, the daughter we've failed to understand." I looked at her hand. I remembered birthdays with store-bought cakes, the silence after report cards, the bus passes while Brandon got new cars. But I also remembered what I said on that stage. The invisible girl grows up to save lives. And part of saving lives was knowing when to stop holding anger like armor. So I placed my hand gently in hers. I'm not the same girl who left Seattle, I said. If we're going to rebuild anything, it has to be honest. No pretending, no downplaying. My dad nodded. We'll earn it, if you'll let us. That night, back in my dorm, I sat with Dr. Voss's email confirming our Stanford pre-publication and the lab's approval to begin prototyping for early-stage trials. My name was on the first author line, and I realized the recognition I craved for years had arrived. But it wasn't what healed me. It wasn't the applause or the awards. It was me, choosing to speak, choosing to demand space, choosing to let go. 2 days after the symposium, the emails started flooding in. The first was from the Buchanan Foundation. Congratulations! You've been nominated for the Buchanan Innovation Fellowship, the highest undergraduate honor for scientific achievement in the biomedical field. I stared at the screen for so long, I nearly missed my TA shift. The Buchanan wasn't just a scholarship. It was a launch pad. Previous recipients had gone on to lead national research initiatives, publish in Nature, even start biotech companies before 30. That alone would have been overwhelming. But it didn't stop there. Caltech's media department wanted to run a feature on me. Full interview, lab footage, photos, background story. Then Science Today reached out. Then a TEDx event curator emailed. Then a reporter from Wired Health asked if they could do a long-form piece titled, "The Girl Who Coded Her Way Out of the Shadows." I felt like I was floating, not in pride, in pressure. Because here's what no one tells you. Success is loud, and when it finally makes noise, everyone wants to claim part of the echo. That night, Brandon called. "You're everywhere," he said with a chuckle. "I saw your quote on LinkedIn this morning. One of my clients reposted it." I exhaled into the phone. It's surreal. I didn't expect any of this. "You deserve all of it," he said sincerely. "Just make sure it's what you want." That last part stayed with me, because the more attention came in, the more people tried to shape my story. They didn't just want the research, they wanted the narrative, the forgotten daughter, the brilliant underdog, the STEM Cinderella. They wanted pain that made for good headlines. But I'd lived it, and I wasn't sure I wanted to share it on their terms. A week later, the CEO of Nurexa, a rising biotech startup backed by Google Ventures, requested a private meeting. We met at a quiet cafe just off Colorado Boulevard. She was sharp, composed, and surprisingly kind. "We've followed your work since the symposium," she said, sipping her espresso. "What you're doing with micropattern voice detection, it's 5 years ahead of anything our diagnostics division has prototyped." I nodded, cautious. "I've still got trials to finish." "We're prepared to fund those trials," she said plainly. "With you leading them, we'd give you a full research team, lab space, equity, and media backing. You'd be the face of this technology." My breath caught. Equity, leadership, resources I never imagined having before 35. "But," she added gently, "our board would want you to be more public-facing, press, panels, speaking engagements, possibly a memoir project." I felt my stomach turn. I didn't know if I was ready to become a brand. Back at the dorm, I sat on the floor with my grandmother's notebook in my lap, pages worn, filled with scribbles, dreams, variables, and raw emotion. In the margins of one page, I had written when I was 16, "I just want to do good work, whether anyone sees it or not." That line felt like a version of myself I almost didn't recognize anymore, because now people were seeing it, and they weren't just seeing the work, they were seeing me, and the girl who once would have given anything to be noticed was now wondering if invisibility had been its own kind of freedom. I met with Dr. Voss the next day. "I need your advice," I said, sitting across from her in our corner lab office. She didn't look up from her screen. "You're overwhelmed." "Yes." "They're dangling bright lights, media, money, prestige. You've earned all of it, Emily. The question is, what's the cost?" I hesitated. What if I disappoint them by saying no? What if I disappear again? She finally looked at me. Then disappear into the work. Let the results speak. Or don't disappear at all, but speak on your terms. She leaned forward. Never let anyone own your narrative, not even the people who ignored it for years. That night, I emailed the startup. I thanked them for the offer. I said I was honored. But I wasn't ready to become the face of anything. I was still building the foundation. And I'd rather build something real in silence than perform brilliance in the spotlight. Emily Turner has been selected as this year's valedictory speaker. That sentence sat at the top of the email from the dean's office, bold and official. I read it twice, then again, like my brain couldn't quite accept that this final microphone, was now mine. I closed my laptop and looked around the dorm room that had been my shelter and battleground for 4 years. Ava, my roommate, squealed when I told her. "Holy crap, Emily, you're going to bring the entire auditorium to tears, aren't you?" I gave her a tired smile. Only if I can keep myself from crying first. The days leading up to graduation blurred into one long montage of last-minute rehearsals, regalia fittings, and tearful goodbyes in hallways that once held silence between us. But behind every handshake and congratulations, a quiet pressure built inside me. What do you say when the last 4 years were both your greatest achievement and your deepest wound? Do you talk about cancer diagnostics and AI breakthroughs? Do you talk about sleeping in labs and surviving on ramen? Do you talk about the parents who only showed up after the world applauded? Or do you say the one thing that still feels raw, but real? That even success doesn't heal everything. And maybe that's okay. The morning of graduation was unusually cool for Pasadena. The sun peeked through the palm trees that lined the campus, casting soft shadows over a sea of folding chairs and maroon gowns. As I stood behind the stage curtain, holding my speech printed on heavy cream cardstock, I glanced at the crowd. There they were. My father, in a navy suit. My mother, her eyes already glossy. Brandon, with a quiet pride on his face that felt more like a sibling than ever before. I turned to Dr. Voss, standing beside the other faculty. She nodded once, that same understated encouragement that had carried me further than any applause. And then, my name was called. I stepped up to the podium, heart steady this time. Not from lack of nerves, but from something deeper. Clarity. Good morning, my name is Emily Turner, and for the last 4 years I've learned how to solve equations, train algorithms, and debug systems that refuse to cooperate. But the most complicated system I've ever had to navigate was belief. The audience quieted. Belief in myself when no one else did. Belief in my work when I couldn't afford textbooks. Belief that I belonged in rooms where no one looked like me, and few remembered my name. A breeze swept through the crowd. I tightened my grip on the podium. Some of us came to Caltech with legacies, with support, with certainty. Others came alone, fueled by nothing but fire. And maybe one person who whispered, "I see you." For me, that person was my grandmother. She told me, "You don't need to be louder to be powerful, you just need to be brilliant." And so I stayed up late. I worked 2 jobs, I missed holidays, and I built a future that no one handed to me because I knew I could. I saw Dr. Voss nod once. My mother wiped a tear. My father looked stunned. If you're here today and you feel like you don't fit the mold of success, if you've ever been told your path was too uncertain, too risky, too ambitious, let me be the proof that those voices don't define you. I paused, then delivered the final lines I'd rewritten 10 times. Because success isn't just about making noise. It's about surviving the silence long enough to reach the mic. And when you finally do, say something that makes others feel less alone. The applause didn't start right away. It started slow, then grew, then roared. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by hugs, handshakes, and flashes of camera phones. But the moment that stopped me was simple. My father reached out, not for a handshake this time, just an embrace. "I was wrong," he whispered. "You didn't need our support to succeed, but You should have had it anyway. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was honest. And maybe that's where healing begins. It's been 2 years since I stood behind that podium in a maroon gown and told a sea of strangers about surviving silence. And sometimes, it still doesn't feel real. I live in a small but sunlit apartment in Palo Alto now. White walls, overwatered plants, and a desk cluttered with research papers and half-finished code. Most mornings, I still wake up before the sun, make terrible coffee, and open my laptop while the rest of the world sleeps. But now, I do it from a place of choice, not survival. Because that girl who once stayed up all night debugging in borrowed shoes and secondhand hoodies, she still lives in me, but she's no longer afraid. The diagnostic technology we began at Caltech is now in clinical trials across 3 major medical centers. We call it ECHO, short for Early Cancer Heuristic Optimization. It listens, it learns, and for some patients, it whispers the truth before the disease ever has a chance to shout. When the preliminary results came in, confirming that ECHO could detect early pancreatic cancer nearly 14 months ahead of current methods, Dr. Voss called me. She didn't say congratulations. She said, "You built this. Now make sure it lives beyond you." And that's exactly what I've been doing. I declined offers from media outlets again. I turned down book deals. I've given a few private lectures, helped train interns, especially young women, first-gen students, kids who remind me of me. But mostly, I've kept my head down and my heart open. A few months after graduation, I used my signing bonus from the research grant to launch the Evelyn Initiative, a scholarship program for underrepresented girls in STEM, named after the woman who believed in me first. Every year, 5 students receive full funding, mentorship, and access to a summer lab rotation. On the cover of their welcome package is a quote in gold foil. "You don't need to be louder to be powerful. You just need to be brilliant." Grandma Evelyn's words, printed like a quiet anthem. When I told my parents about the fund, my mother cried. My father, still not the most expressive man, simply asked if he could contribute. "We can't undo the past," he said, "but maybe we can help someone else have the support you didn't." It didn't erase everything, but it was a start. Brandon and I talk every week now. He still works in venture capital, still lives louder than I do. But our conversations have changed. They're honest, gentle, rooted in mutual respect, not rivalry. A few months ago, he asked me if I was happy. I paused. Not because I didn't know, but because the answer was bigger than yes or no. "I'm at peace," I told him. "And sometimes that's even better." And as for me, I still code, I still research, I still write notes in the back of that worn Navy journal Evelyn gave me. Its pages are softer now, edges frayed. But I don't replace it, because it reminds me of the girl who dreamed wildly, even when no one else saw her. That girl never really left. She just grew into someone who knows. Recognition is nice, but knowing your worth before anyone else does, that's power. If you're still reading this, or watching or listening, I want you to hear this. If your family underestimated you, if your teachers overlooked you, if your boss dismissed you, if the world told you to shrink, don't. You don't need a spotlight to be brilliant. You don't need permission to build something great. And you don't need anyone else's belief to start. You just need your own. So build quietly, burn fiercely. And when your moment comes, take the mic, not to get revenge, but to remind the world that you were always more than they saw. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear. You are not invisible, you're just getting ready, and trust me, they'll see you soon.